Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 on KATX and KWBY as Angela Robinson joins Terry Slavens to share important financial information to help you live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, estate and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Good morning. Good morning. A marvelous Monday morning. A little chilly out, but we all knew it was coming. So anyways, welcome into Life Planning 101. Blakeney Hodges sitting in for Terry Slavens, and happy to do so. Joined this morning, of course, by Angela Robinson, and we've got a guest in.
Yes, good Monday morning, and excited to be here with Aaron Kennedy, our very own CFA at Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. And I think it's the show that everybody's been waiting for all month. You know, there's this little thing called an election going on. You haven't heard about it? I don't know.
Good morning. Yeah, crazy times.
Yes, it is. It is nutty times, and so we're just excited to have him on the show today. And I think everybody's got on their mind about, what should I be doing? Because there's so much unknown. I mean, we have probably one of the most polar opposite elections in our history of where our country could be going. Mm-hmm. And I know if you're a Democrat, you're very concerned about Trump getting in. And if you're a Republican, you're very concerned about Biden getting in. And so this creates that polar environment that we're in today. So Aaron's going to promise to not be political on the show.
Oh, goodness.
But at the end of the day, you have to know, if you're a money manager, you're usually a capitalist. So there is that working for you. And
there you go. I like that.
Yeah. And, the reality is that we have to think in terms of today's the first day of the rest of our lives. And how long is that going to be? And so does that mean we give up because someone gets elected? Does that mean that we take huge risks with our future because someone gets elected? Does that mean that we make vast changes because someone gets elected? Maybe. Maybe not. And that's what Aaron's here to talk to us all about today. So let's start off on that fun note called the election, Aaron. What news have you got for us?
Start off in the beginning. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
The phone calls are starting to come in. People are starting to get worried. Same thing as what happened 4 years ago and 8 years before that. And there's a lot of fear out there. And I'm not saying it's not warranted or not here to make fun of anybody for being fearful, but it's there right now. And I don't know if this is going to help anybody feel better.
But I'm going to say it.
I'm gonna,
but I have to say it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go a little bit different direction. That's probably, the election is not something we should be really focusing on at this point, because I can guarantee if it's not in a week, at least 4 years after that, there's going to be a change. Mm-hmm. And at this point, the sitting president is not the drug that the market's addicted to right now. It's not at all. Back in August of 2007, the Fed's balance sheet was about $870 billion. Today, it's $7 trillion.
Ooh.
$7 trillion. So
where did that money go?
Yeah. And we're supposed to be printing out another $2.5 trillion. So we're probably going to be hitting $10 trillion by the end of this year.
So instead of the market climbing a wall of worry, it's really just climbing a wall of debt.
Yes, it is. We're printing our way to a brighter future. It's kind of funny, no matter where I've grown up, there's always been a train. Hear the train whistle blow. I mean, when we were kids, there was a train in our backyard, and there's one right now. So, but today, that's not wakes me up in the middle of the night. It's the sound of the Fed printing. Constant.
Nonstop.
But the market is addicted to all of this money. And it doesn't matter who the president is. That is what's going on right now. And there was a pretty good interview. It was probably 3 to 5 years ago. It was Jack Ma. He was the CEO of Alibaba. And he came out and said that before too long, we're going to move to a 3-day work week because there's just not going to be enough for people to do. Think about that. So what happens, if your work week went from 5 to 3? That would be pretty devastating, right, from an income standpoint. So, they're not going to crater the economy, but one of two things have to happen. And either our wage inflation goes up by about 65% or prices come down 40%. So what's more likely to happen? All of a sudden we go from zero inflation to 65, or is it that prices continue to come down?
Yeah, and we've already seen that. If you think about, you look back over this past decade in particularly, or even longer than that. You remember like when TVs used to cost thousands of dollars, right? Your flat screen TV, thousands of dollars, and now you can go get a 70-inch for $600.
Yeah.
And can I just
and one
real
person
quickly,
can carry it.
Yeah, exactly.
Real quickly, can I tell you one of the things I saw on the weird Black Friday thing that Walmart's doing this year, like all month long? One of the things they were doing on the 3rd that they're going to drop, one of their things is a 42-inch Roku smart TV for $88.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just nuts. That's nuts. But to your point, it's that. I mean, you look at bringing energy independence into the United States has created a deflationary environment, and that's been huge. So we're already seeing it. Something that's already present. Why isn't it being talked about?
I don't know. It's because it's making all of our lives better, and we're seeing it as a great thing. Mm-hmm. And it is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. But I've been saying this for a long time that we live in an IKEA world. We don't like what Angela was talking about earlier. We don't buy something to keep forever.
Yeah.
We buy it, throw it away, and go to IKEA and replace it.
Get the newer one.
Yeah. I love woodworking, and it tickles me to death to think that the table that I just built would be passed down to my kids, my great-grandkids. It'll last forever. What else is out there like that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
It's really kind of sad if you think about it. Yeah. Our culture has changed so much because everything is, I remember we went to a beautiful house for a retreat, and a comment was made about, and this was a house at PK, and it was built in the 2000s and beautiful. I mean, just gorgeous. And, a comment was made about, these are, this is all the old style. Nothing's the modernized look.
Yes.
And it really took me back. Maybe it's just being from Eastland, Texas, or I don't know. Yeah. But I thought I wouldn't change a dang thing. I think it's gorgeous, But that is the world that we're living in, and it's very interesting. So, getting back, I don't want to get us too far off track because that's huge, and you're talking about inflation, and let me ask this question because I think this is really pertinent. So, with that in mind, these real service heavy industries such as healthcare, for example, that's not just all technology, but actually has to take more people. Do you see a big divide in pricing between, some things are going to be getting cheaper, but some things are actually going to be getting more expensive just because there is going to be such a divide?
Absolutely. This movement that we're in right now, this technology drive, it's going to trickle down everywhere. To your specific point, look at teledoc services now.
Yes.
Now instead of spending 2 hours in the waiting room and paying your copay and having that big cost, it's either free or $50, right. And you're in and out and done. Mm-hmm. And that's
with no flu.
With no flu.
Yeah, right.
But costs should be coming down. We're doing DNA sequencing, so we can actually go make drugs specifically to what we need, and the testing is so much shorter, and it's so much more accurate. So, yes, technology is going to drive down costs in healthcare. The boots on the ground, the nurses, that's not going to slow down. We're going to need more healthcare workers. But what type? There's been a huge push to, do the physician assistant, or, maybe not have a specialist there, but, have 3 or 4 PAs or somebody else, NPs that can do the same amount of work, just maybe at a little bit different cost level or price level.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
So that's coming.
Yeah, it is interesting. I know no matter the time, we're always explaining, to people that at the end of the day, these companies have CEOs that want to keep their job.
Yes.
And they want to move where the market's moving, where the industry's moving. And, I know there's been some great stories about that over these last few years of companies that, like Kodak, for example, that used to be a photography company. And now it's really not a photography company anymore.
No, pharmaceutical.
Yeah, and they've made that change. And I think people get fearful because they don't know what's coming. And you add to the pressure, we've got this massive election, and everybody believes that, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, the opposite side is going to make the country crash. Mm-hmm. And the reality is does that mean that we just quit living life like we're living it and quit pushing this new economy on ourselves?
Yeah, no. You just, I think both of us talk about this all the time. If you're a CEO of some major corporation, you don't want to throw away your job just because someone gets into office. You're going to do everything possible to steer that company in the right direction and make money in the environment that we're in. Because if not, you lose your job. Those guys running those companies, they're making millions of dollars. And that's important to them.
Yeah.
To do what's best,
rely on that.
regardless. So typically the market really doesn't care who's in office. It's never made a difference one way or the other from a market standpoint. Yes, the things, policy can drive the market. Mm-hmm. We did see that. You bring down cost of companies. You bring down their taxes. That does trickle down. That does trickle down.
Tax
to the bottom
preparation may not these days.
But it does trickle down, lowering our regulation, that is huge. So that does trickle down. So policy can make a difference, but usually it's not overnight. Most of the time we see it coming, then, 3 or 4 quarters down the road and say, hey, this is what happened. This is where I saved money. Then the market reacts. But whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or who's in office, the market doesn't care. It just wants to make money.
Yeah.
Well, this is some great information. I know our listeners are going to be super excited to hear this, all of our clients and the families that we work with, just to hear on a broad spectrum, days before the election, that they can really get a good night's rest. So we're going to have more to come right here on Life Planning 101 about what you should be doing with your investments pre-election or post-election. You don't want to miss it right here with Aaron Kennedy.
Welcome back into Life Planning 101 right here on KATX and KWBY.
Yes, this is Angela Robinson with Aaron Kennedy, our very own CFA, and we are talking about all things election inflation, ? And what you need to be doing pre-election, post-election with your investments. And I want to share with you just about God's time and money. I think this is a very important piece in this whole conversation today. A preacher went into his church and he was praying to God. And while he was praying, he asked God, he said, "How long is 10 million years to you?" And God replied, 1 second. The next day, the preacher asked God, "So God, how much is $10 million to you?" And God replied, "A penny." Then finally, the next day, the preacher asked God, "God, can I have one of those pennies?" And God replied, "Just wait a second."
Give me a second.
So with that being said, patience being the key, all things considered, what do people need to be doing? I know you've been real busy and doing some reallocations with the portfolios earlier the last few months, and I don't know that it's election related after the first section of the show, but what do people really need to be doing with their investments and their money?
Probably the smartest thing to do at this point is absolutely nothing. That's hard to hear, but even look back 4 years ago, what happened? If you blinked, you missed 20%. So, if you're drastic one way or the other, more than likely you're going to hurt yourself because, it's just flipping a coin at that point, and you're going to have a 50-50 chance of whether you did the right thing or not. And I don't think a 50-50 chance is something you want to be doing with your future
No.
and your wealth. So we talk a lot about risk on here, and I'm big on getting people's risk right. But if you are a risk taker and by risk taker, I'm going to say if you get excited when the markets go down. Okay, that's what we're going to think about. But if you are, you might pull some cash off the table right now, and just to have something to buy with, but nothing drastic. Very small percentage of your portfolio to take advantage of the market going down, if that excites you. But if it doesn't, hold on, just wait.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, people definitely need to be looking at their risk right now.
Absolutely.
We've got a great tool on our website. We did this intentionally for all of our listeners, in which you can actually go on, take a test, and it gives you like a speed limit score. And you can stress test your portfolio by entering it right there and see what a huge, 2008 financial crisis would have done to your portfolio today. And I think that's a very powerful tool, because there's an old saying that people always make money in percentages but lose money in dollars.
So true. Yeah. So true.
Yeah. So when you wake up, middle of November, and if your portfolio is down 30%, but that equates to $300,000 because you've got $1 million nest egg, are you going to be okay with that? And do you know, this is the big question, if your portfolio is positioned for that to be protected against, or could it happen? And are you okay with that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the big key. We find out all the time when we run stress tests, when people come to us and we show them what their risk is, and they said, I had no idea.
No, I'm very risk adverse. I was like, well, everything's in one stock.
Yeah.
You're taking a whole lot of risk.
Yeah. And I think it's really critical. Aaron, you brought up some things that, forget the government or forget the election, forget the inflation, but you've brought up some things in the past about, things we need to be looking at from an economic perspective. And there's some pretty serious things that are going on in our world today because of COVID. And another shoe may fall. And how important is it, despite the election, despite doing nothing, how important is it for people to really be getting that risk right now? Or should it be something that they can say, oh, we can just do this by the end of the year?
Yeah. If you've been listening to this show, we preach this all the time. You don't need to take care of your stuff just because we're having an election. This should have been taken care of the first time you heard Angela on the radio. It's imperative that you have your portfolio set up to a point where you're not reacting to what you hear on the TV or what you hear on the radio. If you're an investor, a long-term investor, you don't want to react, period. You're investing over the long term.
If you're reacting to every Kramer clang and ring and zing and everything else, that's not a good thing?
No. That's the reason people make 2% on their portfolio on average, because they react to things that they hear. And most of the time it's not good.
Yeah. And I think we've gotten a little spoiled. Just a tad.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. We talked at the beginning of the show about this Fed that's just been constantly pumping money into the market and economy. That's what makes these markets grow, right?
Yes.
So when does that stop?
That's a great question. But if you take a step back and look at it from a bigger picture, this isn't the Industrial Revolution. This is the technology revolution. The world is changing right now. And regardless of what you feel or how fearful you are right now because of an election, things are going to be different 10 years from now. Things are going to be different 20 years from now. And you might as well be part of it. And you can't be part of it and participate with this change of the world if you're sitting on the sidelines or if you're making drastic decisions with your money on a constant basis. Things are too good. Just look down in your hand and see what that phone's done for your life over the last 10 years. And think about what's going to be coming down the road. It's not going to slow down. Things are going to get better. We're going to become even more efficient than we are right now. And I alluded to this a little bit at the beginning of the market, but with zero interest rates, the cheapest way for companies to raise money is to grow. So at zero, growth companies are going to do extremely well because the cost of capital is so low. So take advantage of it. we talk about risk, so don't jump out there and go crazy. But be positioned and know how your portfolio is set up. Get the risk right and enjoy the ride.
Yes. So more to come right here on Life Planning 101. We're going to wrap up the election segment of investing and what you need to be doing with your investments right here on Life Planning 101.
Welcome back in Life Planning 101, third segment this marvelous Monday morning, and we just had to get right back to it because we're so excited to talk about it.
Yes, I know. Elections, right? Everybody's excited to talk about that. I think we're ready for it to be done. But we are talking about your investments, and I think it's really important for people to be thinking about their long-term future. Abraham Lincoln has a great quote. He said, "The best thing about the future is that it comes one day at a time." And I think we need to remember that right now, but we also need to be looking out ahead. And, Aaron has given us a font of things to think about with a changing world, a changing economy. And, I know a lot of people that are most concerned about their investments are those that are retired and they're taking income. And they're worried about this interest rate, inflation environment because CDs don't earn anything, bonds don't earn anything. So how do these types of people get income from their portfolios?
That's a very good question because the age of income is gone. You said it, CDs are zero. High credit quality bonds are, pittance, nothing. So most people have to take more risk to be able to live off their portfolio, more portfolio risk to get that income. So, at this point, you better have a really good system to take income off your portfolio. And, we have a great system. We use the bucket approach of keeping cash on the sidelines so we're not worried about market volatility and constantly replacing that cash. At zero interest rates, you have to be able to do something because you can go to high yield bonds and make a little bit of money, but that's stock risk right there.
Yeah.
At zero interest rates, real estate starts looking really good. Dividends start looking good, and all of that is volatile.
Yeah, you're chasing returns.
We're chasing returns.
Yeah, and if you're doing that, I think going back to that stress test, if you're doing that right now, get your portfolio stress tested. Go to our website, www.kennedy-financial.com, and take a serious look at that because it's not the way to go about retirement income any longer.
No, and that risk test that we have, it's very accurate. So if you're pushing for income in your portfolio and you're trying to get it from dividends or, some higher yielding bonds, when it shows that you're going to be down 30% from holding those things, that's accurate. It will happen. Yeah. And more than likely, it's going to happen very soon. And I think on average, the market goes up and down 20% at least once a year. So can you stomach that? No. And if you can't, you need to get some help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. So to wrap things up, I think here's what I hear. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but here's what I hear is that number one, we have an election. Don't worry about it. Number two is that the market is climbing a wall of Fed dumping. And so, we've got an extreme thing to look at here called deflation and a new economy that's on the way. And if your advisor's not looking at those things and positioning you correctly, you probably need to get a second opinion.
Yes.
And then third thing is, if you're looking for income from your portfolio, it's not about the quote unquote income. It's about having a plan to provide you that.
That's exactly right.
So if you're not doing those things, make sure you give us a call. Kennedy Financial. You can find us on our website, www.kennedy-financial.com. Ask us any question you want. Stress test your portfolio. We care. We want you to be able to be positioned for that long-term success and get that risk right so that you're not making rash decisions when things do go wrong, because it may or may not be the election that hurts you. But it will happen. That's right. Yeah. My name is Angela Robinson here with Aaron Kennedy of Kennedy Financial Services. God bless everyone. Go vote and have a great week.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on KATX and KWBY for more Life Planning 101.
Advisory services offered through Smart Money Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Kennedy Financial Services Incorporated is an independent of Calton & Associates Incorporated, Incorporated and Smart Money Group, LLC.